Good morning, and welcome to the 10th edition of the TEDx Youth Event at Brookhouse. My name is Ahmed Said, and I shall be your host for today. In the spirit of TED's mission, ideas worth spreading, the TEDx program helps organizations, communities, and individuals produce TED-style events at the local level. TEDx events are planned and coordinated independently on a community-by-community basis, under a free license from TED. Here at Brookhouse, we are proud to have provided this platform for over 100 Kenyan high school students from various Kenyan high schools to share ideas worth spreading. I would like to invite our school's head of campus and head teacher secondary, Mr. Mulindi, for a few remarks.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to our TEDx Youth event this morning. This is our 10th edition, and what a wonderful opportunity for all the speakers to give their ideas during this difficult time of the pandemic. And this theme of Be the Change is so appropriate to what's going on now. So to all the speakers, the audience out there, I just want to welcome everyone to this youth event, and I'm hoping that there'll be lots and lots of things to learn and also lots of entertainment. My gratitude to all the teachers who have put in time to enable you to practice and get ready for this event. So welcome and do enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mulindi. This year's theme is Be the Change, and the talks lined up today aim to urge each and every one of you to shift your perspective in one way or another, encouraging you to be the change. To start us off is Amy Wanyoike, focusing on emotional security. Amy, the stage is yours.
The subject of mental health has progressed greatly and doesn't hold the same stigma it once did. Of course, this doesn't mean we've reached a point of complete normalization, but at least our grandparents can stop referring to it as a form of witchcraft. I think that as this normalization progresses, people are growing more accustomed to having mental health talks. My school has done a great job of having these available for students. You can access multiple of these on the wonderful TEDx platform that we're currently talking on today. After sitting through multiple of these myself, there's one piece of information that's always struck out to me as vital, and that is that we should talk about our issues. Many of you might think differently, probably arguing, how does talking about my issues change anything? Scientifically, with a 1988 study by James W. Pennebaker, psychotherapy, or talk therapy, is beneficial to a point and can be used as a preventive method in stopping physical health problems. In a psychological sense, talking about your feelings isn't supposed to change anything exactly. It's supposed to help you rationalize your thoughts instead of stacking them inside. Last year, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us were forced to stay indoors for a longer period of time than we're used to. In this case, I cannot attest to anyone else's experiences except my own, for I was in the house from March 2020 to September 2020, totaling up to 7 whole months. Can you imagine that? Never leaving your house for 7 months. The hardest part of all this was that this was during my exam year. Saying I was stressed was an understatement. The one person I owe to helping me during this time is my older brother, who is also in an exam year. Sometimes after my lessons, I would go to him to talk about how difficult I found my subjects, or to complain about how much work I needed to do. Did talking to him make any of my subjects any easier? No. Did talking to him give me a drive to sit down and finish all my assignments in one go? Also no. But did talking to him make me feel better? Yes. By talking to him, he made me feel like I could do anything, really. It might seem like a weird concept, but it is true. I think that talking about our issues really does help, especially when it comes to slight issues. And I know that not all of us have this type of relationship with our parents, our siblings, or even our friends, especially when discussing issues much more serious than schoolwork. The current dilemma with mental health isn't that none of us know where to go to talk about our issues, but the resources are there. But what use are all these resources when we lack the emotional security to look for them? Emotional security refers to a lack of apprehension, a feeling of safety, and a feeling of confidence in our issues and our experiences. I feel like emotional insecurity is very prevalent in our current society, and an example of this in my school is people refusing to go to the counselor for one of two reasons. Either they may think their issue is too small to possibly pester the counselor with them, or they might think the issue is too big that the counselor could possibly never understand. One solution I think schools can implement are online or anonymous help boxes that can help us put our issues, our general issues in, and that way, when the counselor would deliver talks to like the general demographic of people, we can realize that our issues aren't that special in the least condescending way possible. It can give us the validity that our issues are important because other people are struggling with them. Another solution could be personal helplines, like 911 or 999, which are very familiar to most of you, I'm assuming. I think that by having these, people will lose the apprehension they have with talking about their feelings. And it allows us to talk more openly, similar to like the confessions in the Catholic Church. In conclusion, talking about our issues is difficult, but having to deal with them alone is even harder. I think that schools implementing these helplines and anonymous help boxes can definitely reduce the amount of emotional insecurity in schools, because I believe that we all deserve to feel safe in our own emotions. Thank you, and thank you for listening to my talk.
Wow, wow, wow. That was just brilliant, Amy. Up next, we have Nigel Mbugwa giving a talk entitled Going Autonomous. Welcome.
Great. Up. Well, not up, but like that. I'm going to clip this on you depending on where you want. Pocket or waistband.
looking through the blood samples, that's what gave you results so quickly. So what is the idea behind going autonomous? The idea behind going autonomous is increasing the scale at which autonomous technology is being used. Not only from a nationwide perspective, for example in Kenya, but globally. Because think of it like this. Autonomous technology is already being placed in the hands of people like you and I. Think of Siri, think of Google, think of Alexa. All of these things are being used on a day-to-day scale or a day-to-day basis, but you don't really think about the autonomous technology behind it. Think of Amazon, their factories, using all of this autonomous technology. But the point is, what potential does this technology possess behind it? What's the potential behind this technology to help other people? Be the change is the theme, right? So what can we change? What can we implement to help other people with this type of technology? I'm talking about generalizing it. For example, implementing this type of technology not only in developed countries, but in developing nations, in farms, in ranches. A very good example of this would be a robotic tractor that can plow fields autonomously without any human intervention or control. Meaning it can perform set tasks without needing any labor, without needing the owner of the farm to employ anyone to come and work. This could really be a boost for the economy, as you've already seen its advantages in developed countries. So how can we change? What is the idea? What is the call to action? The call to action starts with ourselves, the youth. You don't necessarily have to be young, but the youth is very key. Why, you may ask? It's because we have one fundamental asset, and that's time. We need time to develop this form of technology. We need time to improve on it, to generalize it, to give it to people that are in need of this technology that could really help improve their lives. We need time. How can we implement this as the youth? By using the resources around us. Think of the computer lab. Think of the subject computer science, physics, biology. You can think of all of the sciences, even business, accounting, etc. And simply think, what if this could be managed by machines? It's not only thought, but also talking to a friend. Sharing this idea with your friend could be very fundamental. Sharing this idea with your teacher. Telling them how machines could run everything. Not necessarily everything to a point where humans wouldn't have any control, but assist us at a very efficient level. Assist us to become better and better our economy, better ourselves from a technological standpoint. So what am I trying to communicate here? If you'd like to go autonomous, first we must think autonomous as a community. We must think autonomous as individuals. We must think like we want to implement this technology in ourselves and around us as individuals first, as it is very fundamental to change the lives not only of someone in the US or someone in the UK or someone in any developed country for that matter, but it could help change the life of someone in Ghana, someone in a field somewhere, planting some crops. If you could simply implement this type of technology, where it has never been thought possible to implement it, you could be the change. We can go autonomous. So I say, to go autonomous, we must first think autonomous. Thank you very much.
What an engaging talk that was, Nigel. Thank you. I would now like to invite Ajilong Muyodi, giving a TED Talk entitled, Beauty is in the Eye of the Beholder. Take it away.
Beautiful. Beautiful. A 9-letter word. 4 syllables that each and every one of us has been taught to aspire towards, something that we strive to achieve for every minute of every day. Well, I have some questions. Maybe you can help me answer them. As a society, how exactly do we go about the business of defining beauty? Is it an entirely arbitrary process? Do we have a system, a specific criteria to be met? Who on earth holds the power to dictate when and how this all-powerful word may be applied? Well, Plato once famously said that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm sure we've all heard it. A quote filled with good intent, yet ever as misleading. Because if it were true, then it wouldn't be only 4% of the women alive today who would consider themselves beautiful. If it were true, then the fashion and makeup industry wouldn't be able to prey on the insecurities of young men and women for profit. I mean, a multi-trillion-dollar industry built entirely upon the ideas of exclusivity and separation, on the concept of us versus them, wouldn't survive and thrive the way it does in a world where these words rang true. The global beauty industry is worth approximately $511 billion. That's a big number. The global education industry is only worth $5,449 million. This means that every year, more money is spent on fashion and makeup than on educating the minds of tomorrow. That we deem physical appearance to be more important than even the most basic of competency. Far beyond the industry itself, prominent issues such as bullying and self-hatred stem from the promotion of these hateful and degrading ideologies. Don't believe me? When you woke up this morning, got dressed, looked in the mirror, did you think you looked beautiful? Did you poke and prod at every little thing that they might notice? Did you count all the unflattering angles that they might happen to see? Maybe not today, but what about this week, this month? I hope you understand that I must disagree with Plato when I say that all of us have been brought up in a society that does not allow for any difference of opinion when defining beauty. Well, why don't we look for an alternative definition for the same? I'm sure we're all up to the task. Beauty is a combination of unique features in any shape, form, color, or size you could imagine that is pleasing to the aesthetic senses. See, I like this definition far more because it showcases our greatest defense towards discrimination, inclusivity. The simple representation of features not usually portrayed in the media could be the key to dismantling the repressive systems currently in place and enable the building of new and modern ways of thinking. But hitting closer to home, the little things make a huge difference. Include a figure that you wouldn't usually consider your next art class. Compliment a stranger on something that some may find unusual. But more importantly, do it for yourself. Put on an outfit and skip the poking and the prodding. Wear some makeup and don't count the angles. Redefine your beauty on your own terms. Because while I may not have all the answers, I can tell you this. Beauty is only ever meaningful when it is self-realized. So, in any way you can, I encourage you to see the world around you from a different perspective and appreciate those living in it. As I conclude, and in case you forgot, dear young boy and dear young girl, you are beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajilong, for giving that beautiful message on beauty. Let's now give a warm welcome to Natasha Meher as she presents her talk on widening perspectives. Take it away.
One way to love, one way to be educated, one way to act, and one way to show emotion.
But in reality, we live in a world in which there are multifaceted cultures, ethnicities, cognitive abilities, and so much more. And yet, despite my knowledge of this, I still believed there was only one way. When you look at me, what do you see? Or rather, who do you see? The majority of you will say Black, East African, and you'd be correct. But I'm also Indian. I'm of an Indian religion, explaining the kara on my right hand. This silver bracelet used to represent that God is never ending. My name is Natasha Meher. Now, majority of you might probably be shocked, wondering how. Maybe even looking at the person next to you and giving them a whisper, is she adopted? Well, to satisfy your curiosity, I'm not. I'm the fourth generation of Indian migrants who came to Kenya for the construction of the railways. I'm also a native Kalenjin and Meru. With all this, I may have lost a few of you along the way, but trust me, I was in the same place a few years ago, and maybe I still am. At the age of 12, I struggled with my identity. I was so terrified of discarding my heritage, be it Kenyan or Indian. I grew up mainly around my Indian side. My family was so passionate about the sense of community and relationships religion brought around. As such, I was kind of forced to tag along, but as you can tell, I'm not the typical Punjabi you'd expect to find in a temple. Luckily, due to the blissful ignorance of a child, I was quite oblivious to everything. I mean, unless it included food or being given duties by the Gyani, the person who leads prayers. But around the age of 12, I started noticing things. It was as though I'd stepped into a whole new world in which all of my senses were heightened. Ironically, this is the same year I found out I needed glasses. With my newfound senses, I can now see the world a whole lot clearer. I can now see the eyes following me, the whispers in the corner, and even the slight judgment when I went up to my very own cousins. I mean, it felt as though I no longer belonged in the only world I'd ever known. It took me some time to realize that I was having an existential crisis. The only thing that was going through my mind was, if I'm not her, then who am I? Each time I looked in the mirror, I kept wishing I was paler, had more Indian features, maybe spoke Punjabi, or even handled chili better. I mean, I just wanted something to prove that I fit in, that I was Indian. But then I soon came to realize that I was only looking at it from one side of the story. The danger in believing that there's only one side of the story is that we so easily forget that these narratives were written by people who didn't take into account the billions and billions of us who walk this earth. They were written without taking into account the struggles and challenges we all go through, because they were written in regard to the author and not in regard to the reader. We live in a world in which diversity is treasured, but in reality, standing out is frightening. A world where hypocrisy runs the streets as we yearn for validation from rules we didn't even create. And why is that? Because we hope to play a role in a story written by somebody else, instead of creating our own. I began writing my story in 2020, 3 years later. With the aid of the pandemic, I was forced to be alone with my thoughts and really have a heart-to-heart. I began writing a blog titled Widening Perspectives, in aims to make sure that no one ever believed that there was only a single story, a place where everyone could give their own perspective and show that the only difference between a single story and yours is that you just have to write it. I came to realize that I live a life of multiple and not one of a single story. Thank you.
Amazing. That definitely widened my perspective. Thank you, Natasha. We now have Kimberly Munda, and she will be giving a TEDx talk on stage fright, entitled Desire Overwhelming the Doubt. And she wanted to give her personal perspective on how it affected her and how she's working towards overcoming it. Kimberly, the floor is yours.
I have stage fright. Yes, you heard right. I have stage fright. Now you may all be thinking, a bit ironic, isn't it? Given that I'm standing here on stage before all of you, seemingly unfrightened, perhaps even eloquent and composed. Well, don't be fooled. I practiced this speech about 100 times in the mirror, and yet there is still the looming thought of failure. What if I trip and fall on stage during this live broadcast for thousands to see? What if I stutter? What if I lose my train of thought and forget what I am about to say? Ladies and gentlemen, I am here today to talk to you all about stage fright. To start with the basics, let me proffer the definition of stage fright. Stage fright is the anxiety and panic caused or experienced before any performance. Cold, clammy hands, sweating, an increased pulse rate. You can literally hear your heart beating through your chest. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I'm sure it does. All of us have had at one point or do have stage fright, myself included. Speaking of myself, let's get to know me a bit, shall we? A fun fact about me is that I love to sing. And I recently took to performing, well, as often as my conscience lets me, in front of the crowds. Here are some of my thoughts before any performance. What if I forget the lyrics? What if people don't like my singing? And my personal worst, what if this entire time I never have actually been able to sing and people have been lying to my face but laughing behind my back? Relatable, right? Or is it just me? Now, anyone would expect that the afterthoughts of this performance would be more positive, given that I got through the ordeal that I was initially dreading. However, you would be surprised. Here are some of my thoughts after a performance. What if people were clapping just to be polite? And I heard my voice crack. I ruined the entire performance. I will never be able to perform again. And yet, this glorious cycle continues. So then, why is it that I continue to sing? Well, believe it or not, underneath all this insecurity lies the confidence that drives me in the first place, and the conviction that I actually can sing, and that people need to hear me sing. Funnily enough, in doing this, I ended up teaching myself one of life's most important lessons, which is that the more you listen to fear, the more power you give it. You know how it's become a global enigma that in horror movies people run towards the ominous sound instead of away from it, like any sane person would? Well, ideally, that is how we should react to the things we fear. Marcel France says, "The secret of life is this: when you hear the sound of cannons, run towards it." Allow me to share some more words of wisdom. Fear is not the desire to avoid. Indifference is the desire to avoid. Fear means not knowing how to approach something of interest. Therefore, just because something scares you does not mean that you shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean that you should avoid it. Quite the opposite, in fact. It means that you should embrace it. Because beyond that fear lies the desire to accomplish that very task. And beyond that threshold of accomplishment lies the gratification that will motivate you to do more than you could have ever imagined yourself doing. Now, you may be asking, Does the stage fright ever go away? To be frank, I don't think so. At least not for me so far. However, to quell your worry, I will tell you that it does get better with exposure. Each time you accomplish the task, be it public speaking, singing, or acting, the desire grows and it eventually overwhelms the doubt. So go for it. Volunteer for that conference or that debate for once and become that change to break the cycle. Thank you.
The more you fear, the more power you give it. Definitely words of wisdom I will take home. Thank you, Kimberly. Up next, we have Tanaka Makoni, and as highlighted in her talk, 7 billion minds, but only one unique mind. She harbors a strong belief that we are not born to fit in, rather born to stand out. Take it away.
July 22nd, 2005, 10:34 p.m., 10:41 p.m. The day two very unique-minded individuals were born. Right now, you're looking at the very first picture of me and my sister. But you might think to yourself, but why aren't they wearing pink? But our story is very unique. The day my mom went for an ultrasound to know the gender of her babies, she was told that she's having boys. My parents were so excited about this news. They even named us Ryan and Brian. But on this very day, they're surprised with 2 baby girls. I've always thought of myself as a blessed individual. After all, unlike most people, I have a twin sister. When I tell people I have a twin sister, the first question is usually, are you identical? And the second is, do you like it? I really don't know how to answer that because I don't know what it's like not to be a twin. Growing up, I responded to 2 names, Tanaka and Tamutenda. I'm Tanaka and my sister is Tamutenda. And funny enough, we're fraternal twins. For those who don't know what that means, we basically look nothing alike. But here's a funny bit about being fraternal twins. Whenever we meet people for the first time and they don't know that we're twins, they always seem to get our names right. But the minute they know that we're twins, they can never seem to get our names right, especially teachers. Whenever we sit in class together and a teacher wants to ask me a question, they usually take a really long pause to think of the right name to call out. But it's always the wrong name. Growing older, I became frustrated with a constant confusion. I'm not Tamu, I'm Tanaka, a unique individual. However, twins are the most vastly misunderstood peoples. Cautiously and uncautiously, most of you have thought, because I like it, she must like it too. Twins aren't just clones, but rather have a strong sense of individual identity. I personally have a strong sense of individual identity because I had to purposely build myself the way I am. It's not something that came naturally because society will always assume our collectiveness. As twins, we grow up with collective identities, and as twins, we face different barriers to fully become who we are, whether it be expectations in families and schools. Our paths to become individuals is simply different. But how do we even become our most authentic and individual selves? From a nature perspective, we share 50% of our genes. From a nurture perspective, we grew up in the same household, same friends, same siblings. In all accounts, we're supposed to look and act the same way, but we don't. Turning into our extraordinary selves is much more than following a sequence of letters in a gene. It's about life experiences. Every moment that me and my sister didn't share in common has transformed us. I liked to play the guitar, but she didn't. She had friends that she liked, but I didn't. These differences accumulate over time, and as we grew older and more unique, our life experiences continue to contrast in many numerous aspects of our lives. In order to become our most authentic and individual selves, we must accept that people change, we change, and circumstances change. I vividly remember being in year 9 and knowing exactly what I wanted to become, a doctor. But that changed. In year 10, I wanted to study cosmetology and fashion design. In year 11, I wanted to study genetic engineering. And now, I want to study behavioral neuroscience. I later realized that many of my dreams and aspirations were not meant for me, and I had to be okay with defying the expectations I had for myself. And I quote, "Progress is impossible without change. Those who cannot change their mind cannot change anything." George Bernard Shaw. Being a teenager, conformity is at its peak. There's more pressure to do what's right and what's cool. And as teenagers, we do things to ensure that we're accepted by people in their groups and to keep being ostracizated by individuals around them. Peer pressure. No one can hear these two words and not feel bad in some type of way. Truth magazine stated that 90% of teenagers experience peer pressure and 88% admit into falling into peer pressure. Peer pressure has led into defining beauty standards for teenagers. We've all seen how men and women are portrayed in the media and how beauty standards have been set for both men and women. We've seen the kind of people that are shown on advertisements, films, TV shows, and now news channels share certain features in common. They've decided that these features are eligible for attention and fame. When we talk about beauty, we talk about the 90, 60, 90 body. Long legs, perfect skin. But guess what? People have flaws, and it's normal. Shouldn't blame yourself for the acne, the gap between your teeth, or any feature that makes you special and unique. As teenagers, we tend to idolize celebrities and try to be like them. You need to understand that everything you see is not true. Such idolizations lead to negative self-perceptions. You need to value yourself. Have a high body appreciation. Think beyond the stereotypes. As teenagers, we tend to idolize these celebrities, but you need to realize that your body does not deserve the torture through the harsh diets and intense workouts. Relax, acknowledge. This is the first step towards accepting yourself and true self-love. Therefore, I always remind myself that there are 7.6 billion people on this planet, and yet there's only one me. There's only one person who thinks the way I think. There's only one person who looks the way I look. And still, most of us tend to conform to the patterns of others because we believe we're not good enough. Some of us even go to the extent of imitating those we feel are unique. However, continuously comparing ourselves to others will never make us feel fulfilled or be at peace with ourselves. Being an individual is more gratifying than being the same. You've probably heard of the old saying, if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Then likewise, if you know what makes you unique and you're afraid to show it, does it make an impact? Thank you.
What an eye-opening talk that was, Tanaka. Let us now give a warm welcome to Alana Kariuki, enlightening us on the art of indecisiveness. Welcome.
I watched this show called The Good Place, and there's this character who resonated with me. His name is Chidi Anagonye, played by the talented actor William Jackson Harper. Chidi's pursuit of what would be right and his inability to make decisions out of the fear of making the wrong choice caused incredible suffering for all those around him. And eventually, his inability to decide what bar to go to with his friends led to him being crushed to death by a falling air conditioner. After watching Chidi's tragic indecisiveness story, I learned that the word tomorrow was invented for indecisive people and children. An indecisive person is defined as a person who is unable to I'm pretty sure we've all had mind-aching experience where we had to pick a decision. And no matter what decision you chose, it seemed like we made the wrong one yet again. Questions like, what should I wear today? Should I have coffee or tea for breakfast? Should I go out tonight? Or should I post this picture on Instagram can ruin an indecisive person's day. An indecisive person is defined as a person who is unable to make decisions. And when they do finally make a decision, they're not confident about it and often change their mind. Does this sound like something you suffer from? Well, I do too. I remember taking a survey and it had two options, agree or disagree. The question being asked was, do you think 30 minutes is long enough? At first I thought, yes, I do think 30 minutes is long enough. So I ticked agree. But then I thought to myself, wait, I don't think 30 minutes is long enough. So I rubbed out the agree and picked disagree. But then I realized I actually don't think 30 minutes is long enough. So I rubbed out the disagree and was left without an answer. It reached a point where I had to ask my teacher if I could add another option where I was in between, because deciding to what extent I agree or disagree was very difficult for me. He refused, so I asked him, "Sir, how do you deal with indecisiveness?" And he said, and I quote, "Just decide." As if it were that easy, and if it was, I wouldn't be talking to all of you here today. I wouldn't be talking to all of you here today. I began to realize a pattern in my behavior. The first thing was that I had to ask other people for their opinions on a decision. The second thing was that I was okay with not making a decision at the end of the day, and I was okay with not making a decision at the end of the day, and that the stress was too much for me to handle, that I wouldn't make a decision. What really fascinated me that day was how eager my classmates were to learn the answer to that question. It occurred to me that I was not the only one who dealt with this mind-boggling experience, and that I wasn't alone. I realized that I had to embrace the fact that there are no wrong answers, and that it's difficult, if not impossible, to pick a decision based on hypothetical information. Making imaginary decisions is not only difficult, but it is an incredible waste of time. Let's say I asked you guys, where do you want to travel to the most? I mean, half of us would say Italy, Greece, or Japan. But to the other half would think, oh, Australia looks amazing, but isn't it too hot? Or, I'd love to go to London, but doesn't it rain a lot? Now, this is where I tell you the art of indecisiveness comes in. When you think too long and hard on decisions, the outcome may be the right one for you. This gives you time to explore and try out new things while subconsciously ticking off the things that inhibit you from making a decision. Students like you and I can use this when picking our future careers as we start the "what do you want to do in the future?" conversations so early. Indecision becomes decision with time, and I can guarantee you that millions of people suffer from this, so we are not alone in this. Of course, it's better said than done, but using the power of indecisiveness to your advantage, you can make your life a little more stress-free. Thank you.
Just brilliant. Up next, we have Tiffany Gitonga, as she gives us her insightful talk entitled Roots That Connect Us. Tiffany, you have the floor.
I want you to imagine a 12-year-old little girl from Kenya going abroad to see the renowned fireworks in Dubai. You can imagine how excited she was. And on top of that, she was getting her hair done at the hotel salon like everybody else. Expectedly, she felt like a princess. As she was waiting for her turn with her mum, keeping in mind she had already chosen the hairdresser she wanted, because the others looked like they wouldn't understand her, and he did. So later, as he was doing her hair, 5 minutes into it, he was really nice. But after that, he seemed to get irritated, and of course the little girl could see that. A few minutes after, he slammed the brushes on the table and walked out of the door. The little girl was horrified because she had never had this type of reaction towards her hair. The whole salon was staring at her, and the man who she thought would understand her didn't. By the time this whole blow-up had occurred, the hairdresser next to them, who didn't look like he could understand her, was finished, so she took her in and did her hair. Surprisingly, she was really nice. She asked about where she was from, how she liked doing her hair, and even apologized about her colleague. But when she was leaving, she saw the previous hairdresser doing a Caucasian lady's hair and having the time of his life. And I mean the time of his life. The little girl was so embarrassed, she turned away and walked away quickly. Now, as you can already tell, this little girl was me. This experience really taught me to how different my hair really is. And abroad, how different my hair is really rare. Nowadays, when I look back at this experience, I always ask myself, what if he had gotten a 12-year-old little girl just like me, but with even tougher and kinkier hair? Would he have taken one look and said he couldn't do it? My story shows that abroad, people are very ignorant on how to take care of black child's hair. However, as much as we like putting other countries in the spotlight, Kenya too has its flaws on wearing your big, beautiful afro out. If you walk out on the streets today, most, if not all girls, have braids. For several good reasons, of course. But to name a few, it is extremely difficult to take care of African hair, and it needs almost an hour or even more to try and make it look perfect. And who are we kidding? No one has that much time in the morning. I feel like this is mainly due to the fact that we've been confined in such a way that not only until 1964 the discrimination of black hair was abolished in workplaces, meaning we did not have much time to experiment with products and healthier, easier ways of treating our hair. So, then we put our hair in braids. If left out, it can break. If straightened, it can cut. And if exposed to cold, it can shrink. And so many of us opt to protect our hair. And honestly, I don't blame us. However, I feel that the biggest factor of not leaving our hair out is this less social judgment. Girls tend to feel more confident and comfortable when they're in braids because it mirrors what the standard of social hair beauty looks like: long, straight hair. And in my experience, unless my natural hair looks the best it has ever looked, less people tend to compliment me. And in a recent study by Dove and Crown Coalition, it shows that 80% of black women change their hair to fit social norms and expectations. The matter of the fact is, having African hair is hard. Whether 3B, 3C, 4A, 4B, and 4C, and with each come their challenges. However, they have one thing in common, and that thing is that they're all beautiful. Every curl, coil, knot you take to detangle after a good night's sleep takes a warrior, and in my opinion, some people can't handle it. However, I do acknowledge that straight and wavy hair also do have their challenges. However, what I find difficult to understand is the pool of educated Caucasian girls who are constantly flooding TikTok comments, complaining and arguing with each other about how their hair is so hard to manage. Yet everyone fails to take accountability that there are other girls around the world their age that have a much more difficult time with their hair, and act as though, in my opinion, the world revolves around theirs. This needs to stop. The bickering online, the prejudice on African hair, and the silent judgment that makes us feel so uncomfortable, we barely even mention it. There are 1,000 words that can be said without even saying them. We see the stares, the faces, the smirks behind the masks, and this can all stop. If people are interested to go expose themselves to how Afro shrunk, curled, coiled hair looks like, because in essence, we're trying to normalize something that is normal. I hope one person can walk out of here today and say that they've learned something. Something that would make them hungry to go educate ignorant people. Something that would make them want to go change people's perspectives to make people like me feel more comfortable. Because I believe one mind is all it takes. But before I go, I'd want to leave you with this. Why is a black woman's biggest hair problem that she thinks her hair is a problem? Thank you.
I'll give a warm welcome to Erica Irungu, touching on the prominent issue, gender equality. Welcome.
How many of you have ever been discriminated against because of your gender? How many of you have known someone who has been discriminated against because of their gender? So we've all either faced gender discrimination or known someone who has. I don't know about you, but that's very discomforting. I mean, even with the dramatic changes and the many obstacles we have overcome, gender inequality still seems to be very prevalent. Okay, so what is gender equality? Gender equality, also known as sexual equality or the equality of sexes, is a state of equal ease of access and opportunities regardless of one's gender. This includes economic participation and decision-making, the state of valuing different behaviors and aspirations and needs equally. Gender equality is a human right, a necessity. Gender discrimination is rooted deep into the many different cultures found here in Kenya. Pervasive discrimination and cultural norms have deeply influenced women's land tenures, especially customary laws that virtually all ethnic groups deny women rights of inheritance, despite the country taking initiatives to strengthen women's land rights by passing the Matrimonial Property Act of 2013. In Kenya, there are there's a lot of patriarchal views when it comes to land, as it is seen for the boy child. Automatically, the girl child's role is just to be married off. Women and girls in Kenya are being forced into many early marriages. For many, this means that their school careers would inevitably fall into pieces as they are expected to take the role of a good wife, bear children, raise them, presumably alone, cook, clean, be of service to her husband, and repeat. Take Elizabeth, for example, was barred from attending school by her parents and was planned to be subjected into FGM and being married off. But at the tender age of 16, she ran away and found refuge at her aunt's place. Sadly, this didn't last long, as her father came and forcefully removed her. She ran away, and 3 days later, she found refuge at a rescue center for girls. Again, her father showed up and tried to remove her. Luckily, this time, the management came and threatened him with police actions. He left and did not return. For many, their stories don't always end up the same. Well, at least not like Elizabeth. Some don't even know that there is a way out, that they're allowed to want much more. I mean, it's the only life we know. Who are they not to comply? Well, let me echo the words of the wise Matthew Scully. Some traditions and habits are just that. Comfortable excuses to let things be, even when they're unjust and unworthy. Cultural practices like FGM, early marriage, and restricting girls from attending the highest possible education are just that. Unworthy, unjust, and plain wrong. Gender discrimination is also being faced in urban areas as well, as women still remain underrepresented in decision-making and political leadership. The Kenyan Constitution states that a third of the parliament seats must be held by women, though currently only a fifth of those seats are actually held by women. Kenya's patriarchal views on women taking part in elections or being part of the parliament have resulted in many being physically and verbally assaulted. According to our local gazette, women representatives have been labeled as flower girls, slay queen, a waste of tax paper money. Well, let me reassure you this is far from the truth. Take a look at Millie Odhiambo, an inspiring role model and MP, known for sponsoring the victim, 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 take a look at Millie Odhiambo, known for sponsoring the bill that prevents re-victimization in the court. So while we have made enormous strides towards gender equality, we still have a long way to go. And it's up to each and every one of us to come together and come up with possible solutions, not just for the women in Kenya, but for women around the world. But I'll give you a few head starts. 1, share the care, especially in household and childcare. Roles like cooking and cleaning, these aren't just roles for women. Men can partake in these roles as well. 2, call out harassment or call out harassment, from catcalling to mansplaining to sexual inappropriate jokes. 3, women, get involved in politics. Say what you think. And men, consider voting for very many qualified women. Take a look at Ellen Sirleaf Johnson of Liberia. 4, teach girls their worth. Encourage them to speak out and assert themselves. Change the language and the narrative that discourages them to do so. Say they're bold, not bossy. 5, remember girls own their bodies and have a right to make decisions about them. And finally, 6, don't hate women. Just don't. Gender equality is a fundamental human right and essential to achieving a peaceful society. Together, I know that we can make this happen. But before I leave, let me end by quoting Sojourner Truth. If the first woman God made was able to turn this world upside down, these women together ought to be able to turn it right again. Thank you.
Before I introduce the next presenter, I would like to say goodbye, as I will now be handing over to my co-host, and I'll let her introduce herself. I would now like to introduce Leon Muriuki, gracing us with his rendition of Imagine by John Lennon. Leon, take it away.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell or heaven, a brotherhood of man. It's easy if the people living for today. Imagine all the countries it's easy for to do. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people living for today. You'll may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. Possessions, it's easy if you do. It's not hard for the heavens, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living for today. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. What a beautiful performance. Welcome to the second half of the TEDx event at Brookhouse. I hope all the talks so far have been educative and entertaining. The spirit of change is most definitely in the air. My name is Ivy Kinuthia, and I shall be the second host of this event. I'd now like to welcome Kamal Ali, whose interest in philosophy and its practical applications have inspired his talk today. Kamal, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. How to get smarter in 10 minutes. Sounds like an ad for a bad self-help book that none of you would buy. I mean, even worse, it sounds like a downright lie. How could one possibly become smarter in 10 minutes? And if there was a way, surely it would be well known by now. I mean, what novel discovery about cognition could I have possibly made? Well, you're right. And you're wrong. You're right in that I haven't made a new discovery in cognitive psychology, but you're wrong if you think I don't have a new, possibly valuable idea to share with you today. Today I want to discuss common sense and why your English teacher was right when she said common sense is not common to all. More specifically, I want to talk about logical fallacies and how important it is as a concept to understand in today's world. Now, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a philosophy student, nor was I interested in things like formal logic. I mean, formal deductive reasoning is hardly the conversation starter. I don't think my route to developing an interest in logic was particularly unique, and for this reason, I think that it's able for you guys to. I don't think my route to developing an interest in logic was particularly unique, and for this reason, I think that it is possible for all of you to do the same. By dictionary definition, a logical fallacy is a flawed, wrong, deceptive argument that can be proven wrong with reasoning. My first foray into the world of logic and logical fallacies was after a sort of novel realization for me. In political discourse, I saw time and time again a point being articulated, and opposers would change the argument significantly and then proceed to refute that. In fact, it happened to me at dinner table debates with friends and families. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate. After some research, I came to know that these are known as strawman fallacies. Let me give you guys an example. You make the point that judicial and prison reform is required to stop unjust convictions. Someone refutes this by saying, "So you want murderers walking in our street?" Of course you do not want that, and that was not the point you were trying to make, now was it? By agreeing with him or her, they may feel they've invalidated your argument, but that is not the case. Complicated issues are complicated for a reason. They require nuance, not yes or no answers. People who use this fallacy tend to turn complicated issues into simple ones, where emotions, not reason, dominate. There's an interesting story about a Hungarian mathematician who had the job of figuring out where to place armor on warplanes in World War II. Now, the planes back then were not as developed as the ones you're accustomed to today. These planes could only carry a very limited amount of armor and still be able to fly. So this mathematician's job was to figure out the most vulnerable parts of the plane such that they could be armored. Here is a picture of a plane that survived battle. Now, the red dots indicate where the bullets pierced the plane. Where would you guys put the armor? If you said the parts that received the most damage, you would have held the same views as the US commanders and myself a few months ago. After all, you should defend the parts being hit the most, right? Be that as it may, these statisticians were able to understand that these holes revealed the parts that needed the least additional protection. How does any of this make sense? The mathematician Wald asked a simple question: where are the missing bullets? The parts where the bullets pierced the plane did not return precisely because of where they had been pierced. This is an example of survivorship bias, which then can be described as a logical fallacy, where one focuses on people or objects that have made it past a certain selection process and ignores the ones that have not, usually because of a lack of visibility. I'm sure there are other examples you have tangled with in your lives. Maybe you switch on the news and someone tells you to disregard what someone else is saying simply because they have not gone to school, as if a university degree is the only indicator of whether someone can offer valuable information and opinions. This is an ad hominem fallacy, which is very common in my experience, defined as attacking someone's personal traits and character to undermine their argument. It is prolific within the political discourse and disappoints me every time I see it. Understanding why a person's line of reasoning does not support their conclusion can be useful. All of you read the news, watch the news, have Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp constantly being sent links of what happened today and what's happened yesterday. Essentially what would have been called an information overload many years ago, but today is the norm. This constant consumption of information also leads to us consuming some misinformation. How much? I do not know. That is the subject of another TED Talk. But this constant flow of misinformation has been proven to be used to change our attitudes and essentially control us. This was the work of Cambridge Analytica, who were hired in order to influence the US elections and elections here in Kenya. Constant exposure to illogical conclusions on why refugees need to be expelled for our national security, or why this person is going to save our country, or why a corruption scandal happened, can change our approach to policy on certain issues. Think about your opinions on some local, national, and international issues. Are they grounded by logical claims and conclusions, or have you been misled into holding an opinion with no strong logical basis? Francis Marie Awa, a writer, a philosopher, also known by his pseudonym Voltaire, had some funny entanglements with the ideas I'm exploring this TED Talk, namely logic and how it was used and misused in society. One of his quotes that I find myself coming back to is, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Let's think about that for a second. Some of the greatest tragedies happen because a narrative was pushed or people were scapegoated for the wrong reason. A good example of this, one of the dark stains of the history of our great nation, the 2007 and 8 post-election violence. Our country has historically had polarized politics because of narratives we have been fed and emphasis on our differences rather than our connections. However, we can overcome the polarization and pressure put on us by misinformed leaders. We can catch polarization before it becomes unmanageable and let no one delude us our brothers and sisters are our enemies. I am of the opinion that a philosophical education is fundamental in the building of a truly well-educated and well-informed society. And if we cannot hold our leaders accountable, then we truly do not have a democracy. But with the tools I've shared with you today, I hope we can hold our leaders accountable, elect better leaders by seeing through sham arguments and sham manifestos, and create a prosperous society for our communities and for our children. Now, I hope with the time I've been allocated, I have not frauded you, and if not a 20-point boost to your IQ score, then at least you now have better tools to analyze and understand the world with. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kamal, for that talk. And I'd like to invite Mona Rutich, who will be talking about, are you really in anti-corruption? Let us all pay keen attention to her as she discusses this global vice. Thank you.
Are you really anti-corruption? What is corruption? Corruption is the dishonest behavior by those in positions of power. But is it only that? I want you to look at it from a different view. A view that not only focuses on the leaders of our country, but on our own selves too. While speaking on this topic, it is very important for me to mention that corruption is a worldly issue that pervades every country on some scale. Yet, whenever corruption is talked about, African countries come into the limelight. And first world countries have the idea that African countries are not capable of organizing themselves. This is completely hypocritical, as we are capable of organizing ourselves, and corruption does not only exist in African countries. Don't get me wrong though, I do know that many African countries are corrupt. Otherwise, I wouldn't be speaking on this topic. But isn't every country to some degree? Why do people think that African countries cannot govern themselves? That ideology has to perish, and so does our individual contribution to corruption in society. Let me explain what I mean. I did a small survey here in Kenya and asked different people coming from different ethnicities, different jobs, economic backgrounds, ages, and so on about the views of corruption in Kenya. As expected, I got to hear and understand the many different views people had on corruption. Many said, corruption is the source of a bad economy, and the government is behind it all. And if we aren't so corrupt, would actually be so far as a nation. I then asked them this: do you think the corruption only exists in the government, or the common Mwananchi citizen is also part of the problem? Many hadn't thought about this and were astounded by the question I had asked. They looked at me as if I was mad. I asked a matatu driver, a matatu is the public transport here in Kenya, to be able to survive without partaking in corruption. He immediately said no. Matatu drivers, when stopped by the policemen, would naturally give them kitu kidogo, which is a small bribe just to avoid the long process of going to the police station, so as not losing business or time. Did you know the matatu drivers already set aside the money that they earn just to bribe a policeman? They have become so accustomed to it that when they're stopped, they don't even need to be asked, but already hand over the money without hesitation. It is enriched in their daily lives and is almost like a routine for them. But I mean, they have no better alternative. Don't you see the problem? Although it is embedded in our society, I do believe there's always a possibility for change. Think about this. How about if every matatu driver collectively decided, I'm not going to pay this bribe, and instead goes through the long process of going to the police station and getting a fine? They'd be able to teach the policemen that it's not so easy to get a bribe and realize this is not such an effective way of policing the community. Okay, now look at some sort of way you have contributed to corruption in your daily life. It could be cheating in tests, as many of you here have probably done before once in your life. Or in your day-to-day task, just to use the easier route. We have become so accustomed to it from when we are young that when we're older, it is the norm. For example, Have you ever gotten a foot in the doorway for a job or sped up a process just because you know someone? This, by very nature, is corruption. Again, don't get me wrong. I do know we should always be criticizing our government to enforce democracy and help our community grow. But I also firmly believe we need to look at our own selves. This is why I believe we should start from school. School policy makers should enforce the issue of corruption in our curriculum worldwide. Yes, it may be easier to cheat on that test and get that A and make your parents proud. And yes, it could be easier to pay that little bribe just to avoid the long legal process. And yes, it may give you a handy leg up just by knowing the right people. But why can't we eradicate this stagnated way of thinking and have a sense of integrity? Why are humans so quick to judge others, but not judge themselves? Just like those Western nations that are so keen to paint corruption as an issue that does not involve them. Why do we only see the speck out of our neighbor's eye, but fail to see the beam out of our own eye? Although we should end corruption starting from ourselves, I also believe it is a team effort. As if one person is true to the anti-corruption stance, it is honest and great, but it won't really be effective in solving the problem at hand. But if we all are collectively true to ourselves, I believe we could end corruption as a whole here in Kenya and worldwide. I want you to think of small ways you have become so accustomed to corruption in your day-to-day tasks. If you want change so much, why can't you start with yourself and not only blame the people of the leaders of our country? As Nelson Mandela so wisely said, we can be the start to change. We can change the world and make it a better place, but it is in your hands to make the difference. Be the start to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona, for challenging us to break the cycle of corruption around us. I'd now like to invite Terry Masharia to give her talk. Terry, welcome.
An infectious smile is something that we all possess. We can choose when to smile and where to smile. A smile is a gift. It is something that keeps us happy. It is an extraordinary thing that can stabilize and brighten up our moods. It too can stabilize our feelings of well-being, reduce stress, relax our bodies, and reduce physical pain. Over the past 2 years, some of us have been agonized. Others still struggling to keep up with the rapid changes that are affecting our day-to-day lives. And most of us dealing with lots and lots of pressure. We have all undergone circumstances that keep us stressed. Over the past 2 years, some of us have contemplated on what we've done. This disease had made us rethink about and reduce our smiles. The masks we wear on our face says, hide our beautiful smiles. And if we can't tell when somebody is smiling, then we won't get our daily dose of joy that we used to have 2 years ago. Our smiles are contagious, and depriving yourself of such simple joy would be a disservice to yourself. Even if it's just smiling once in the morning, you may be able to lighten up your day. You may be able to make your day better and also relax, have a relaxing day. This disease has made us, this disease Corona has a lot of positive impacts that we tend to overlook. One of these impacts are spending more time with our family because of the lockdown. When the lockdown happened, fear, worry, and uncertainty spread faster than imaginable. We continued to see and worry about what will happen next. But we fail to realize that it is because of the lockdown that we spent more time with our loved ones. The disease has many deep benefits that we tend to overlook, and they vary for each and every one of us. Mary and Angel once said, Ralph Marston once said, happiness is a choice, not a result. If you choose to be happy, then you are better off, and if nothing will make you happy unless you choose to be happy. No person will make you happy unless you decide to be happy. Your happiness will not come to you. It can only come from you. Thank you.
What an insightful talk. Up next, we have Ru Abdullahi, who will be giving a TED Talk on the topic love. Ru, the stage is yours.
Love. What is love? A four-letter word that sums up everything for us. Or it's supposed to sum up every feeling we have that we can't express. This four-letter word, L-O-V-E. I thought love was supposed to be beautiful, easy, and simple. This is before I completely denied its total existence. But we'll get to that. Robert Sternberg is a psychologist, and he defined love as the combination of three components: passion, intimacy, and commitment. When people share all three, they are said to be in a state of consummate love. This love is considered to be the ideal type of love, but is relatively hard to maintain for a long period of time. Intimate love encompasses the close bonds of a loving relationship. Passionate love is based on drive. Commitment or committed love is for couples who are committed to being together for a long period of time. Eric Fromm, this is another psychologist, and his definition of true love was inspired by Dubsky's definition: an act of will, intention, and promise. As I started to ease into the reality that love still exists, I discovered that there were 6 main styles of loving. Eros, loving an ideal person. Ludos, love as a game. And Strudge, love as a friendship. And 3 secondary styles. Mania, a combination of Eros and Ludos, obsessive love. Pragma, a combination of Ludos and Strudge, realistic and practical love. And Agap, a combination of Eros and Strudge, selfless love. Romantic love, you see, is more than a feeling. It's a human impulse based in our species' development that has led to better survival. And it is this drive that gives you a lot of energy, a lot of concentration, and a lot of elation. Science has found that the 3 components of love, each of which are fueled by different combinations of hormones. In both men and women, estrogen and testosterone play a role in lust. Adrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin, the same hormones generated by new experiences, drive attraction. Long-term attachment is regulated by oxytocin and vasopressin, the same hormones and brain chemicals that promote bonding. As we started to develop and progress in life, the human race as a whole seems to have forgotten the true meaning of love. You see, we have gone from great Greek philosophers such as Socrates and Roman philosophers such as Cicero to a conceited, selfish, egocentric generation that seems to have lost the plot on the most basic of things. One of those things being love. Love used to be a word so sacred, it would never be as abused as we do right now. The fact that this generation is so uneducated on this topic is the reason why we don't take it seriously. This generation has hackneyed this word to the point where it has no meaning. And something without meaning lacks significance and is a waste of space and simply ceases to exist. This is what has happened to the word love. Personally, I never understood the concept of loving another person. Don't get me wrong, I love myself. But the thought of loving someone else terrifies me. The thought of loving someone else terrifies me. Everyone else thinks that love is as simple as these Hollywood movies make them out to be. But let's not lie to ourselves and believe that. As I'm naturally human, I began to fear what I could not understand, and this fear for love turned into hatred. I hated that other people were able to say that they were in love or that they loved someone, because whenever I tried, I always failed. And I understand that I'm young and that I have time, but why can others my age find it so simple, so easy? When I look at someone else and I see how they look at their significant other, it's as if everyone else simply ceases to exist. And I yearned for this feeling. So I took matters into my own hands, and I began to love myself. This is when I discovered my own self-worth. If others did not want to love me or could not love me, then I would love myself because I refuse to be unlovable. Again, I understand that it's not fair to want someone to love me when I know very well I would be incapable of reciprocating those feelings. But if they truly love me, would they not wait for me? Now, when I look back onto love as a whole, I've come to the realization that it's not just a chemical reaction, it is a combination of so many different emotions, like compassion and intimacy. Although intimacy isn't just lust, it could be the smallest of things, such as an entanglement of hands as one walks with their significant other. As of right now, I've come to the realization that love still exists as a whole, whether it be romantic love or platonic love. It all exists. I'm not saying I'll let my guard down as of right now, but I'm hopeful for what the future has to hold. When the right person comes along, I, too, will be ready to love. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Rue, on opening our eyes on the different kinds of love and their significance in our lives. I'd now like to invite Aliyah to give us her TED Talk. Aliyah, the stage is yours.
If the path of time never stops, if it is an eternal arrow that moves in if the path of time never stops, if it is an eternal arrow that moves towards infinity, how do we become ourselves, and how exactly do we lose ourselves? Who chained us to the shackles of self-deprecation? Ladies and gentlemen, today I bring you the notion of self. This is me as a child. At this age, the thought of self-deprecation never really crossed my mind because one, I never knew what self-deprecation was. And two, my motto that I'd followed was that it is my world and you're just living in it. However, these positive connotations did not follow me to my next phase in life. This is the second phase that I like to call pre-modern Aliyah. This is where my self-destruction had begun. My main source of self-deprecation had started from my skin tone, whether it was logging online to see how people equated darker skin tones to bad or ugly, or the constant social pressures to change my physical appearance. The external challenges were always fought from the inside. Therefore, I had started to find comfort in humor, self-deprecating humor. I had always negatively commented on everything about myself, whether it was my height, my weight, my skin tone, my hair, everything. I never spared myself a joke. I had programmed my mind to do this in social settings because I believed that if I had said it before somebody else, then the pain would be less or it wouldn't affect me as much. Now, this is modern day Aliyah. Modern day Aliyah still does have her insecurities, but I'm not bound by self-deprecation. Now, I find myself walking through confidence and see that the jokes that I've made before had never really benefited me. It all starts with a simple joke. The subconscious mind is a data bank which keeps all the stuff that your conscious mind does not keep, from your behavior, from your memories, your skills, your beliefs, and your past experiences. Your subconscious mind keeps everything that you don't have, including the fact that everything that you've done, thought, or seen is kept here. Once you keep on repeating yourself every day or self-deprecating every day, you believe that your subconscious mind absorbs this, and eventually you start to believe it. Now let's put this into practice. For example, if you're constantly talking about how your dark skin tone is a negative thing, this accompanied by the negative connotations of how darker skin tones in society is treated will eventually push you to change something about yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, I have presented to you about how bleaching industries make their money. The negative connotations of darker skin tones that was presented to me created a loss of self. However, it didn't take me long to realize that these are social constructions made to indoctrinate people under self-deprecation and capitalize off of this. Now, do you see how something small as a little joke can fund billion-dollar industries such as bleaching creams, which advocate for self-hate and self-destruction? Self-hate is seen as a more easier and approachable, is a easier approach to identity in society. This is because you're more likely to degrade yourself in front of other people in hopes of avoiding awkwardness or not coming off as conceited, which I'll further address. You start to say things around other people in order to not come off as conceited, and through this, we have created a communication culture around self-deprecation, seen through Twitter memes and basic banter between friends. It's very normal at the beginning, just making a joke at your own expense. However, over time, this unhealthy habit becomes a destructive pattern as you tend to focus on your flaws and not your strengths. Self-deprecating jokes aren't even as funny anymore as they were previously. They just expose your insecurities. According to Dr. Sherry Jacobson, Clinical Director of Health Therapy, she states that a lot of people unintentionally self-deprecate, and that is where the problem begins. This is because she suggests that if you're often told that you often self-deprecate and it comes off as surprising to you, then it is more likely a case of low self-esteem rather than self-deprecation, meaning that you unconsciously do this and it could come off as, and it becomes a case of low self-esteem. The miscommunications or the misconceptions of low self-esteem make sure that self-deprecation is just the tip of the iceberg. Researchers have realized that we have adopted self-deprecation in order to optimize our statements when talking to other people and to come off as modest. Additionally, we have created words that limit people's identity in society. We've created words such as cocky or conceited to limit a person's approach when speaking to you. For example, according to vocabulary.com, a conceited person is somebody who sees themselves in an inflated image and sees themselves as wonderful and amazing. So once you talk incessantly about your ability to play the clarinet or your amazing ability to wiggle your ears, you, my friend, are considered a conceited person. I have equated personal deprecation to personal destruction. So how do we get rid of these destructive tendencies? Firstly, we have to look at the fact that the answer does not lie in the pages of self-help books, in the pixels of television screens, nor does it lie in the words of motivational speakers. However, it lies in knowing thyself. Calling yourself ugly does not make you prettier, nor does calling yourself dumb make you smarter. So today I ask you to practice gratitude and know thyself. Thank you.
Wow, that was not only inspirational, but educative. I'd now like to call upon Camille, who gives the talk entitled, Your Name, Your Destiny, Your Crown. Camille, welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I am Camille Shayo Olu. I am Nigerian by ethnicity and of the Yoruba tribe, which is found in the southwestern region of Nigeria. The cry of a newborn baby in a Yoruba household is a joy, praises to above, and laughter-provoking event that is considered to be a blessing poured directly from the heavens and into any fortunate family. As praises to God and songs of joy resound throughout the household, peace, relief, and a sense of hope inhabit the hearts of the parents. The importance of children in Yoruba culture cannot be emphasized enough. As a result of the birth of a child being of great importance within Yoruba society, following events such as the instilling of morals into, growth, and mental and spiritual development of a child are not taken lightly. However, the primary, most important event that follows the birth of a child is the ceremony in which family members, both immediate and extended, present the child with a name in the presence of a religious leader. A Yoruba adage states, "Ile ni a n wo ki a to so omo loruko," which translates to, one pays attention to the family before naming a child. This forms the basis on which the Yoruba name-giving customs are carried out. It is believed that a name is what molds a child into who they later become as a person, and most importantly, what determines a child's destiny. Names may be given based on the circumstances a child was born in, the experiences of the parents, or simply the vision the parent has for the life of their child. Consequently, names are of utmost importance within Yoruba society and are believed to be the crown that adorns the spirit of a baby and the driving force that sets a child up for triumph in life, be it physical or spiritual. Yoruba names, therefore, tend to be complicated and not the easiest to pronounce. My 14-letter first name, Anuoluwa Camille, is definitely no exception. One of the most common and repeated scenarios I continue to experience to this very day is the scenario in which someone struggles with the pronunciation of my name. Camille, Kamaya, Camille, and Kayime. I have heard it all. From a substitute completely denouncing the pronunciation of my name, to my year 5 French teacher telling me that his new name for me, the French version of my Yoruba name, was Camille. I've heard it all. from the anxiety that fabricates knots in my stomach whenever it is time for the register to be read out, to the jealousy I feel whenever my classmates' names are read without any hassle. I've experienced it all. At this point in my life, all my 14-letter first name was a source of embarrassment, nervousness, and disgrace to me. When I was about 9 years old, I moved from my predominantly black school, where people still struggled with the pronunciation of my name, to a more racially and ethnically diverse school. And as a result of the terrible experiences I underwent with my name at my previous school, I decided that I was going to go by a new name, Kami. On my first day of school, as my drama teacher read out the register, he managed to pronounce Anuolua Kamiya without making any mistakes correctly. I was taken aback because in my 9 years of existence, very few people had taken the time to try and pronounce my name, talk less of saying it correctly. However, I felt embarrassed and chose to ignore my name being called out because it was embarrassing being the new girl in a class of 24 with a 14-letter name. From that day onwards, I continued to go by Kami. Whenever anyone would mention Kamiya or even try to pronounce it, I would shut them off completely and tell them that my name was Kami, and I should be referred to as that and that only. In fact, the majority of my friends did not know that my real name is Kamiya and not Kami. It became so bad to the extent where majority of my friends still refer to me as Kami till date. These happenings, however, made me come to the realization that I was letting one of the most important elements of my entire existence come to a complete demise. When I was about 13, I found social media and began to use it more often. I would frequently come across videos and memes that summed up the issue I was facing in regards to my name. As I watched a TikTok video of a girl dreading the taking of the register, or looked at memes of the boy making a cringing face whenever people butchered the pronunciation of his name, it had dawned on me. I was not the only person experiencing this issue. Millions of Nigerians, Africans, Asians, Hispanics, and Latinos across the globe were experiencing the same issue that I was. I vividly remember the day that my entire perspective on having my name changed. I vividly remember this day. I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across a post that read, "Young black girl with the big name, correct them every single time." Initially, I scrolled past the post, not thinking too much of it, but I eventually felt compelled to go back to the post and pry into its deeper meaning, and I did just that. This post, in its 12 words, had managed to sum up every single hurdle I had faced in regards to my name, from the day I found out what a name was, to that very moment. And I realized that I had gotten it all wrong. My name wasn't and isn't too long. People's willingness to learn the pronunciation of my name is simply too limited. I realized that it was not my responsibility to come up with an easier, more catchy nickname that I could be called by people who simply were not bothered enough to learn the pronunciation of my name. When I was a new pupil at Brook House about a year ago, one of my classmates messaged me and asked me, "Kamiya, how's your full name pronounced?" I asked her why she wanted to know, and she said, "Because I want to know what to refer to you as." So I told her the correct pronunciation of Anuolua Kamiya, and she thanks me and says from that moment onwards, that's what she'll refer to me as. I still remain confused and once again asked, why do you choose to learn the pronunciation of Anuolua Kamiya, rather than refer to me as Kamiya or Kami, as most people do? And she said, and I quote, "Because we are Africans and we need to learn to embrace the uniqueness of our names." I was taken aback, not because she had taken the time to learn how to pronounce my name, but because there was so much authenticity and truthfulness in the statement that she had made. At this point, I had an awakening. Years ago, when my forefathers were bought and sold into slavery, they were stripped of their identities, their heritage, and their names. The meaning of Anuolua Kamiya is, God's mercy has counted me worthy to be among the living. I have been blessed with the privilege to have been given a name that holds so much power and meaning that it would be almost unappreciative of me to toss my name in all of its magnificence aside. My ancestors were stripped of their names, but I have been given a name so carefully plucked from the most intricate parts of the Yoruba language, and it is my responsibility to embrace it, not only because it is a beautiful name, but also because it is who I am. It is my identity, and it represents the destiny that I came to this world to fulfill. Your name, your heritage, your cultural practices, and your cultural identity are what make you, you. You should never try and fit yourself, as magnificent as you are, into the little box of what society tells you that you should be. Do not settle for less. Do not let them refer to you as what you do not want to be referred to as. Correct them every single time until they get the pronunciation of your name right, because that beautiful name is your crown, your identity, your legacy, and your gleaming destiny. And you cannot afford to dim the bright light that is your destiny because of the obligation you feel to conform to the norms of society. My name is my destiny, and my heritage is my crown. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Thank you, Camille, on encouraging us to embrace our heritage and be proud of who we are. I'd now like to invite Dr. Richard Munyang, who would give his TED Talk on mindset change for youth and climate entrepreneurship in Africa. Welcome.
Just take a minute and look into your hand. What do you see? When I look at mine, I see a unique purpose. We have a 1 out of 63 trillion chance that our fingerprint, whether we are living, dead or alive, is same. And it's not by chance. We are uniquely made. We are uniquely made for a purpose, because the purpose of life is to be useful. And our usefulness is to drive transformational change. But the route to finding that purpose is one that is paved with challenges. 43 years ago, I was born in a little village called Jinquin in the northwestern part of Cameroon. I was not born into opportunity like many across the entire African continent today. I grew up facing the brunt of crop failure. And the words we heard earlier in our lives from our mom was famine. And this meant consequences. It meant consequences for us going to school with our stomach aching of hunger. It meant consequences for us having to beg food from our neighbors whose crop has not failed as ours. That was my journey to purpose. It was my moment of epiphany. The moment I started to look at solutions and start to think, how can the problems of crop failure that we saw in our mother's farm, how can they be solved? I then later on understood that what we know today as climate change, which is manifesting itself in droughts, as we're speaking today, 2 million Kenyans are facing drought, in cyclones and floods, and hurricanes, you name it. And these are manifestations of the changing climate. Just in 2020, the world lose up to about 210 billion as a result of climate disaster events. But the science is unequivocally clear on this. In August 2021, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report which has been described as a good rate for humanity. And this report showed that we have only 20 years to go above 1.5 degrees. And the United Nations Environment Programme Emissions Gap Report, which was released just last week, showed that if all the plans that the entire world have put in place are actually just to be implemented as they are, we will go up to 2.7 degrees by the end of the century. But this is happening at a time when the continent Africa is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. And this is bad news for a continent where our mothers, our brothers and sisters go to bed hungry. 257 million of them. Where we have 60 million malnourished children every year in the continent. Where we have 12 million youth getting into the labor market each and every year. disenfranchised because they cannot find the jobs. And on top of this, the COVID-19 pandemic have only added to this precarious equation. And so what do we need to do? We need a new perspective. We need a new perspective which is summed up in this African proverb that every adversity carries with it the seeds of equal or greater benefit. Yes, in the turmoil of climate change, there are seeds of opportunities. And these seeds of opportunities can be tapped through what we call climatepreneurship. Yet it's about us using what we have and moving away from complaining and blaming each and everyone, but finding in it to retool our skill, regardless of where we come from, regardless of what age or what we study in school, to just do something to help that mother in the community. It's about co-creation of value for the community as we help mothers put more money in their pockets and food on the table. But to actualize this climatepreneurship across Africa, we need what I call foundational attributes. Like a lion, we need to understand our context. And the context here, I'm talking about the socio-economic context of Africa. We have a continent where the informal sector that contributes 80% of the jobs in the entire African continent today are the most vulnerable to climate change. And we must be able to leverage and ensure that whatever thing we do, we lift them from the bottom of the pyramid. In addition to having the mindset of a lion, what we need to do is to have the eye of an eagle that can see 3 kilometers away, what I call an eye for solutions. 56% of emissions in the African continent today are land-based, coming as a result of deforestation for agricultural land and the harvest of charcoal. But we're in a continent where each and every year, 700,000 Africans die as a result of indoor pollution. 700,000 Africans are not just a statistic. They are dying because of indoor pollution because they depend on charcoal. But turning agricultural waste, simple agricultural waste, where each and every one of us can retool our skill, can be able to reduce this. We need the discipline of an ox. Like an ox can plow, the discipline, the consistency, the persistency. We need this to be able to drive entrepreneurship and above all the wisdom that can then be able to see challenges in adversity. And I will leave you with 3 fundamental principles on how we can be able to drive climatepreneurship in the African continent today. The first is climate action is an investment opportunity. We must graduate from projecting liability anytime we are faced with a challenge. Yes, we know, but Africa is also a leader. 98% of the entire African continent have ratified the Paris Climate Change Agreement. In every country, starting here in Kenya, you ratify the Paris Climate Change Agreement. You have the Climate Change Act of 2016. And across the entire continent, Africa is a leader. We also have physical policies. If you look at Kenya, the 2021 finance bill have physical incentives, taking off 20% VAT on briquettes, on burgers. If we tap into this, we can create climatepreneurship enterprises in the country and even across the continent. And the second part, Africa's youth are Africa's powerhouse. We cannot ignore them. We cannot make them the footnote always. We have to make Africa youth the head note. Because without them, we cannot be able to drive transformational change. We've developed an incubation space called innovative volunteerism that have become not just a sing-song across the entire continent, but a climate action movement where we're seeing youth being inspired to retool their skill, to refine their skill, to adapt their skill, to turn challenges into opportunities. We are guiding them and inspiring them to turn their passions into profit. And what we are seeing starting right here in Kenya, young people are turning agricultural waste into briquettes that are replacing charcoal to Uganda, to Ghana, to Nigeria, to DRC, to Cameroon, and across the entire African continent. We are seeing a new perspective, a perspective where young people are moving away from complaining, but actually becoming the center stage for solutions. We are also seeing them retooling their skills and fabricating solar dryers that are decentralized to our mothers in communities just to dry their rice, just to dry their veggies, just to dry their beans. And they are tapping into a $48 billion US, which is as a result of post-harvest losses across the continent. And with all this, we need the last point, passion. Passion is the new currency of now. You cannot do anything without passion. Through anything on passionless people, through money, and nothing will change. It therefore means that we must be able to cultivate that passion, and that needs a new mindset change. It's a mindset change from leveraging on what we have so that we can apply emergency brakes on the complaining and the blame game that sometimes we get embroiled in. We need a new mindset change to actually usher ourselves into what I call righteous anger, but not righteous anger to complain, but righteous anger to act, because the only antidote to despair is action. The only antidote to frustration. It's action. With actions, we can create a groundswell of hope that can usher millions into opportunities. There comes a time in any generation where they face a challenge. But anytime they face that challenge, they always roll up their sleeves to face it head on and devise a solution. Climate change is the challenge of our time. And we have the opportunity to turn it into climatepreneurship enterprises across the continent. That is the only way we can supercharge and turbocharge the bottom of the pyramid and drive transformational development. Let's start today. Thank you.
Wow, that was brilliant. Thank you. Now gracing us with her rendition of A Change Is Going to Come is Charlene Birech, accompanied by Hope Marie. Let us give them a welcome.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like that river I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. Don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh yes it will. I go to the movies and I go downtown. Someone keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But then he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. And oh, there's been times that I thought I wouldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh yes it will. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh yes it will.
Wow, that was absolutely beautiful. We have now come to the end of the 10th TEDx Youth event. I'd now like to take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Joyce and the whole speaker training team who have worked hand in hand with the participants today. The tech team for their efforts in making this event a success. Furthermore, to the Brookhouse management for giving us this platform. And finally, to the speakers, without whom this event would not be possible. Thank you.